organizations here in Moorestown. Mostly, I would like to thank all of the candidates for being here tonight. Being a member of the Board of Education is a thankless and sometimes difficult job. Anyone who makes the commitment to become a member should be applauded. Lastly, I will make a quick plug for Home and School. We're a nonprofit entity that exists solely for the benefit of all of the children within the school district. We are the organization that funds the fun things, the extra things, and sometimes the needed things. This year, we help pay for resources to help our K-6 teachers make more fun and interactive online classes. We provided the funds for Chromebooks that will be coming to our elementary students. We'll also be providing some funds for outdoor seating at WAMs. We provide scholarships for our graduating seniors and pay for each and every assembly that happens in every school. We also do things for our community, such as this forum and our annual turkey drive, where we make sure that all families have a Thanksgiving dinner. To be honest, I could sit here for a good 30 minutes rattling off all that we do, but I just don't have time for that. It is through your volunteering, membership, and additional donations that make it all possible. Please reach out to me if you have any questions or just want to know how you can help. I would now like to introduce Karen Reiner of More Unity, who will be moderating tonight. Karen.
Thanks, Harry, and hello, everybody. I really want to thank Harry for inviting More Unity to organize and moderate this candidate forum for the Board of Education. This will be our second time doing this. And for those of you who don't know, More Unity is a local civic group who believes that we're stronger as a community when we learn from one another's perspectives, life experiences, and opinions. And you can learn more about us at moreunity.com. But we're not going to talk about More Unity anymore. We're going to talk about tonight. You're going to have an opportunity to meet the 6 candidates who are vying for 3 positions on the Moorestown Board of Education. We're grateful to, and we have deep respect for, these folks who are demonstrating their commitment to excellence in our schools and our community by running for the BOE. Just to give you a sense of how the night's going to flow, we'll start by giving the candidates 2 minutes each to introduce themselves. And then we'll begin asking some of the questions that were emailed in advance. The candidates will have a minute to respond to each question. And we have a timekeeper, Mark Morgan, who is going to help us remain on schedule. We ask all the candidates to respect the timeline. When they see Mark hold the yellow card, that means there's 10 seconds to go. A red card means that time is up. The candidates are going to respond to questions for about 50 to 60 minutes, and then they'll each have a chance to make closing comments at the end. The candidates are going to be introducing themselves in alphabetical order, and then we'll rotate who goes first, responding to each subsequent question. So the same person won't always have the disadvantage of having to go first. And our goal is to finish the program by about 9 p.m. Just a little bit of background in terms of how we put this together. Board of Education election is a nonpartisan election. But that said, More Unity wants to be sure that we're avoiding any perception of bias or conflict of interest. So the volunteers who helped preview the questions that were submitted from the voters were an even mix of Democrats and Republicans. We're doing our best to run a fair and balanced event and to ensure that the questions that are being asked are representing the questions that the voters sent in. I'd like to help you understand the process we did for that because there may be questions about that. The amazing thing is that we received a total of about 120 questions from voters that came in over the past couple of weeks. Our planning team, which included a statistician, sorted the questions by category, and then based on the frequency with which certain questions appeared, we prioritized how much weight and time should be given to each category. In a couple of instances, some of the questions were so similar that we merged some together. So if you're a person who posed a question and the first half sounds like your wording and the second half sounds like someone else's, that's why we were trying to pull in together wherever possible as many of your questions. One thing of note is that over 10% of the questions that were submitted were addressing the candidates' qualifications, their skill sets for subcommittees, their familiarity with the Board of Ed. Questions like, how many meetings have you attended in the past when you were a regular citizen? And do you understand what the time commitment of the Board of Ed is? Since we had already allotted 2 minutes at the start and 2 minutes at the end for the candidates to talk about their qualifications, we asked them to roll those particular elements into those introductory and closing comments. So that frees up the bulk of the evening to address the other topics that were the most prevalent. And just to kind of give you a head up and have some expectations, by far the largest number of questions that came in were in the category of diversity and race. So you can expect over the course of the night that you'll hear 3 questions on that topic. That represents the percentage of the questions that were interested in that topic. But in addition to that, we'll have 1 to 2 questions related to several other topics of interest to a large number of voters. And since it's going to be impossible to get to all 116 questions, I've already compiled them, and when this forum is over, I'll be emailing them out to all of the candidates. And that way they'll know what was on your minds as they wrap up their campaigns in the next couple of weeks. And for the 3 of them who wind up seated on the board winning the election, they'll know what was on your minds as they're taking on their role on the board. Okay, so that just gives you a little bit of background. Now we're going to meet the candidates, and we're going to start in alphabetical order. You're each going to have 2 minutes to introduce yourself. And we do have the power to mute you, unlike some recent debates that we saw Chris Wallace and Susan Page moderate. So don't make us use the mute button. I don't think we'll run into that problem here, but just in case. So we're going to start with Jack. Jack Fairchild, you're going to be going first. You have 2 minutes to introduce yourself, tell us about your background, and help address some of those voter concerns about. And Jack, you want to unmute yourself.
Yep. All right, good to go. Thank you, More Unity and the Home and School Association for this forum. Engaged and informed citizens are truly our most valuable assets. 20 years ago, my wife Jamie and I chose to make Moorestown our home and raise our family here. We have 2 teenage boys in high school, and I myself am a product of New Jersey public schools, and I believe strongly in public education. I've been serving on the Moorestown Board of Education since January 2017. In 2001, with the passage of No Child Left Behind, my attention was brought to school governance. I began testifying in Trenton to both the New Jersey State Board of Education and the New Jersey Senate Education Committee in opposition of standardized testing as a graduation requirement. I'm now seeking my 2nd term on the Board of Education. Throughout my tenure, I've served as a member and chair of the Finance and Operations Committee, a member of the Negotiations Committee, as well as the board liaison for the Health and Safety Committee. I've attended multiple community engagement meetings, the Delegate Assembly of the New Jersey School Board Association, as well as multiple Burlington County School Board Association meetings. I also attended the 2018 annual New Jersey School Board Association workshop in Atlantic City. Throughout my career as a fire protection engineer, I have dedicated my life to the public well-being. I was a member of a National Fire Protection Association committee, which oversaw national safety standards in our schools. I'm currently vice president of the Philadelphia Society of Fire Protection Engineers, where I've increased our scholarship fund by more than $100,000. I'm a member of the Philadelphia American Institute of Architects Government Affairs Committee, where we collaborate with city and state government officials. I'm an ethical, data-driven, analytical person, and I'm humbled to have your support. Thank you.
Thank you. Perfect timing there. Okay, we're going in alphabetical order, so the next person will be Val Gallagher.
Hello, everyone. Again, reiterating what Jack already said, thank you to the Home and School Association. Thank you to More Unity for allowing us to have this opportunity. And more importantly, thank you to the individuals who are on and attending this, I don't know if I really call it a debate, but this conversation certainly this evening. I never, first of all, thought that I would find myself running for any type of anything, because it typically isn't something that's been on my to-do list, as they say. And to give you a little insight about who I am, my family and I moved to Moorestown a little over 3 years ago. And we moved from Berlin Borough, which has a K through 8 school all in the same one. So a much smaller school district. My older son actually attended that school. And when we moved here to Moorestown, he was in Bishop Eustace. So he graduated this year from Bishop Eustace and is a freshman in college. Talk about what a year to be a senior in high school and a freshman in college. And so my younger son is 8, and he is a 3rd grader at Mary Roberts Elementary School. And when we moved to Moorestown, we were renting for a number of different reasons. And up until even recently, we really thought that, you know, part of our time was going to be spent in Florida. And so once I was asked to, you know, participate and run for the Board of Education, I said, you know what, it's probably time for me to really establish roots in the community. From kindergarten to my senior year in high school, I went to 6 different schools. And before anybody thinks, no, my parents were not in the military. I was born in Delaware and bounced back and forth between South Jersey and Eastern Pennsylvania. My mom was a stay-at-home mom, and my dad worked, and we had 1 car. So rather than drive 2 hours, you know, we you know, moved around a lot. So my background is unlike anybody on the current board. And that is, I am good at negotiating, and more importantly, I'm a mom, I'm a parent, and I want to be an advocate for other parents and their children in the school, or in the school. Thank you.
Thank you, Val. Okay, the next person will be Sarah Rivera.
Hi, good evening. I'm Sarah Rivera, and thank you for having me. I've lived in Moorestown for about 5 years with my husband and 3 kids, ages 6, 9, and 11. They go to the UES in South Valley, my kids, not my husband. I work here in Moorestown for Lockheed Martin. I've been there 17 years. I'm the program manager for the United States Coast Guard. I'll tell you a little bit about my skills and characteristics. First of all, I'm very pragmatic. I approach basically all problems with data-driven solutions. I'm also tenacious and goal-oriented. As an example, in my personal life, I completed 2 half Ironmans in my mid to late 30s with 3 young kids, which is an unbelievably hard feat. In my day job, I've been given awards from admirals in the Department of Defense for outstanding management of large-scale defense programs valued at over 5 times the Moorestown BOE budget. And I understand what it means to really support a quality product. And in this case, a quality product is our children's education. Now, in my early days in Moorestown, we were really happy with the district. We were at South Valley, and we were really loving 1st and 2nd grade. However, in the past 18 months, I've seen a shift in priorities that just hasn't sat well with me. Recent board members, current board members, 3 of whom are on this call today, have acted with disregard for both policy and input of the community. And that is just unsatisfactory to me. So if I am elected, I vow to use my vote wisely, work in the best interest of the families of the district. I vow to get us back to following policy. And I will approach this really with the utmost vigor and passion that I do everything else in my life. And I really look forward to working with the team. Thanks.
Thank you, Sarah. Next, I'd like to introduce Lauren Romano.
Hi, good evening. First, again, let me thank Moorestown Home and School for sponsoring the forum tonight and More Unity for facilitating the event. My name is Lauren Romano, and I proudly serve on the Moorestown Board of Education since January 2017. I currently serve as chairperson of the Curriculum Committee, Communications Committee member, and the board's legislative liaison. And I just began serving on the newly established MTPS BOE Committee to explore race and racism. I also serve on the New Jersey School Board Association's Health and Wellness Steering Committee at the state level. And additionally, I proudly am serving as Burlington County School Board Vice President since December 2019. Professionally, I'm a current special education teacher with over 20 years of teaching experience. I began my professional career as a high school social studies teacher of college prep and AP classes at Burlington City High School. I took a few years off from teaching when my son and daughter were little, and later returned to graduate school with a calling to pursue special education. I've been working at a private school in the county for the past 13 years in the area of post-secondary transition for students ages 18 to 21 with disabilities. This year, I took on the additional role of supervising the transition department at my school. I bring my professional experience and perspective to the Moorestown School Board as a voice for all students in our district. As a special education teacher, I focus daily on meeting the individual needs of all of my students. As a board member, I believe this perspective is invaluable and the lens through which I make my decisions. As a school board member, you have to keep in mind the numerous needs of different types of students and various demographics that make up our community. It is imperative to demonstrate the ability to listen and evaluate differing opinions to collaboratively come up with equitable decisions as a school board member. I loved growing up in Moorestown, and I'm proud to be an alumni. As a mother of 2 children currently attending the high school, I am committed to maintaining our town's strong educational standards and reputation and working hard on behalf of our district and all of our students. Thank you.
Okay, and now I'd like to introduce Mick Weeks.
Hi, thank you. First, I would like to thank Home and School and More Unity for the opportunity to connect with the community and share my ideas and qualifications for this role. I believe my background in K-20 education, previous board experience, and strong ties to our community uniquely qualified me to fill this role successfully. I've spent the vast majority of my career working in and with educational institutions. I currently advise colleges and universities on implementing remote enterprise management solutions for teaching, learning, and administration. Prior to that, I spent 19 years at Apple, working with innovative K-12 districts in our region. I helped to plan and implement successful student-focused learning and teaching solutions. During my previous term on the board from 2017 through 19, I was very vocal about our need to broaden our definition of success in our ever-changing world. As the chair of the Communications Committee, I developed and helped execute the Community Engagement Forum, a series of meetings that fostered a new level of conversation with parents, teachers, students, and general members of the community. I enjoyed leading conversations about how we could incorporate an understanding of social and emotional learning and achievement. We also explored as a community how we could better support our students and have a more holistic approach to what success means for each individual learner. I also served on the curriculum, referendum, buildings and grounds, and residency committees. While we have a tradition of excellence in our schools, the most successful organizations continue to strive to evolve and tackle new challenges. My understanding of the role of a board member is to lead the conversations around how to do that in a manner that best supports learning and teaching in an effective, fiscally responsible, and ethical way. That's how I would approach my role, and I would continue to do that in a new term. Given my previous experience, I'm certain that I can manage the considerable time commitment it takes to be an effective board member. I'm a lifelong resident of Moorestown and a graduate of Moorestown High School. I have a master's degree in public administration. My wife Julie and I have a daughter who's a junior at the high school and a son in 3rd grade at South Valley. So thanks for listening, and I hope to speak to your questions tonight. Thanks.
Thanks, Mick. And last but not least, I'd like to introduce Julie Woodrow.
Good evening, Karen and Harry. Thank you for giving us this opportunity as well. I'll try to be quick. My background is I am a nurse. I've worked on medical surgical units. I've worked in the operating room. I've worked on labor and delivery units. Most recently, I currently work at Moorestown Visiting Nurses right down the street, right down Pleasant Valley, as a clinical review nurse. So I look at hundreds and hundreds of pages of documentation a day to make sure the documentation is complete and clear and ready to be submitted for reimbursement. So to speak of qualifications, while I haven't come up with policy for schools and I haven't sat on a school board before, I am definitely, I definitely deep dive into whatever it is set in front of me. Just to switch a little bit, we moved to Moorestown from Merchantville 7 years ago. My kids were in 2nd grade. They're now both in 9th grade here in Moorestown. We moved specifically because the schools are wonderful here. And I spent most of the time up until about the last 18 months, I believe, like Sarah said, thinking the schools are wonderful, there's no problems. And then I started looking a little bit closer at things, and I kind of started questioning some things as well. And that motivated me to pay more attention to the board meetings, and then to become more engaged and run for Home and School. I am a parent. As a nurse, I advocated for my patients. As a member of the school board, I will absolutely advocate for our kids in this town because they deserve it. They deserve the best education. All kids from all demographics in this town, I will absolutely commit to them. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, everyone. I noticed that there was a participant who was using the hand raise function. We didn't really address that. We're not going to be able to interrupt the speakers while they're going, but we do have preset questions that were submitted by voters in advance that we're going to go through. If we get through all of those questions and there's still time remaining, anyone who wants to raise their hand, then we'll accept questions from the audience verbally. So unless that person who was raising her hand was indicating a technical problem, if there's some sort of technical problem, Anne Marie, I welcome you to raise your hand again, and then we'll make sure that we get that resolved. Okay, so we're going to move on to the questions. Now you're each going to have 60 seconds to respond to the questions. And the first question is, over 60% of every Moorstonian's tax bill goes to fund the schools. In the last several years, the board has increased taxes to the maximum allowable amount. And this past year, the board went above the 2% tax cap. Due to the pandemic, there is a reduction in student population, less curriculum delivery, and more economic hardships. Do you believe a tax increase in next year's budget is appropriate? And Val Gallagher, you'll be going first this time around.
Lucky me. There's only a few times I want to be first. This is not one of them. Listen, make no bones about it. You know, a lot of people are in a lot of really tough spots right now with kids not being in school full time. And it has already made a financial impact on quite a large majority of parents. So as far as I'm concerned, I am not for a tax hike. I'm just not. I understand why. I get it. When I owned my own business, I had to be fiscally conservative because I didn't have a big pool of money that people, were just, dumping buckets on. So I personally would want to take a look at the current operating budget, where money's being spent, and figure out how not to increase taxes to make things tougher than they already are for people.
Okay. The next person will be Sarah Rivera. Sarah, do you need me to repeat the question, or are you good? Okay.
I'm good. So no, I do not support a presumed 2% year-over-year tax increase, nor do I support a presumed tax increase of any kind whatsoever. Our operating budget is around $82 million, well over the $54 million that the state determined as our budget adequacy, which is the amount that they say requires, our district requires to provide a thorough and efficient education. So there's roughly a $25 million gap there that we spend over and above what the state has deemed required. Now, with the large majority of our $82 million going into an unaffordable MEA contract. Now, what some folks may or may not know is that the MEA contract only specifies specific salary requirements per years of experience and education levels per teacher. It does not say how many teachers we need. We have set salary levels way high. The average for New Jersey is 3.01% increase, and ours are in the high threes and low fours. It's unaffordable. No, I do not support tax increases.
Thank you, Sarah. I was trying to unmute myself and I was clicking on your mute button, so sorry about that. Okay, next up after Sarah, Lauren Romano.
Okay, so I appreciate the question, and just to be quite honest with you, having dealt with 3 budget years, I would find it very challenging to make a statement that we would be able to have a budget next year that didn't drastically cut services to students. I think at this time, that's not a wise decision. Currently, we are working under the contract with the teachers, so there's not a negotiation next year to reestablish salaries or benefits. And because of the underrated, the fact that we are an underrated district. We have been underfunded by the state of New Jersey, over $1 million for the last 10 years. So we have been cutting and cutting and cutting out of every budget for the last 10 years. I don't see a way to make a promise that we would not be able to raise taxes. And with the pandemic, we've also had the problem of not having as much revenue generation as our budget originally had allowed for. So that happens to be, unfortunately, the fiscal reality we're in with the current situation.
All right, thank you. Mick Weeks, you're next.
Sure. Thanks, Karen. And thanks for the question. So I said in my opening statement that I believe in being fiscally responsible. And I think fiscal responsibility means taking in the whole picture, understanding the situation, and making a decision. The 3 years I spent on the board and the time I've spent outside of the board looking at the school budget, I think I understand pretty well what's going on. I haven't seen the specifics of the current budget, but I do know that costs are higher despite students being in remote and hybrid situations. I do know that we have been, as Ms. Romano mentioned, chronically underfunded. I think the number this year is close to $1.5 million. However, I do know there's CARES Act funding that is available to organizations, to schools around the country. So I'd have to take all that into balance. But I also know that we were in an untenable situation before, and that without tax increases going to that 2%, we weren't going to be able to fund the level of education we have now. So I don't think it's possible to make that promise. And I would want to look at it more, but I think we would have to seriously consider raising them.
All right, Julie Woodrow.
I don't have the details of the current budget to be able to speak with any kind of authority right now about that. My feeling, and obviously nobody can make any promises, but here's my feeling. We already have, even though Moorestown is considered a very wealthy town, we have people in this town who don't know where they're getting their next meal. That's a reality. So I come from a place where I want our kids to have the best education, but I don't want us to lose sight of the fact that we have people who are just hanging on in this town. It concerns me. And a tax increase, while unavoidable, maybe I'd have to look. It would be such a burden on so many residents in this town. Thank you.
Thanks, Julie. And then the last person for this particular question will be Jack Fairchild.
Thank you, Karen. Certainly don't want to outright say that we need a tax increase. We have a substantial, as Lauren stated, we have a substantial loss of revenue this year, compounded with increased expenses. And frankly, our budget is just completely in the hole. One of the major issues that continues to be a sticky point year over year is transportation costs. So we constantly look for, I constantly look for savings in transportation dollars, but really to avoid increases, you need to cut somewhere. The teacher's contract is the vast majority of our budget. So it's already allocated, and there's not much that the board has flexibility with.
All right, thank you, Jack. Okay, we're going to move on to another question. We're moving to a different topic. I told you at the beginning that diversity and race was by far the most frequently asked topic. And so we have 3 questions on that. I'm going to ask you 2 of them next, so one at a time. So I'm going to ask you the first one, and then we'll do a round, and then the second one. Okay. And the person who's going to be going first this time will be Sarah Rivera. And here's the question. Current students and alumni of color have been speaking about their experiences of bias, racism, isolation, and lack of support in Moorestown Public Schools via Instagram and elsewhere. Have you followed this, and do you believe there is an issue with systemic and/or overt racism within our schools? If so, what do you believe are the problematic areas in the district related to equity and inclusion? So for now, we're not asking you to come up with solutions. We're just asking if you're aware of the students who have been speaking of their experiences of bias, racism, lack of support, and what you see as problematic areas, if any, within the school district. And Sarah, it's your turn.
Thanks. So yes, one, I'm aware. Two, I'd like to speak about what I consider to be the most pressing diversity issue within the district, and that is the achievement gaps and the proficiency gaps amongst the Asian, White, Black, and Hispanic populations. The state of New Jersey has set the targets for proficiency extremely low for both Blacks and Asians, for both math and language arts. For example, the math target for Blacks is 36% proficiency, and we didn't even achieve that. We achieved 33% proficiency across our Black population for math proficiency. Now, is that an outlier? No, let's talk about the Hispanic population. So the target for Hispanics in math is 45% proficiency. And we achieved it. We got 56% of our Black population to achieve the math proficiency targets. Counter that with the Asian population that has targets at 80% and above, and they consistently achieve those targets. So that is what the biggest issue is here.
Thanks, Sarah. Lauren Romano.
So to answer, the first part of that question, yes, I am aware of the Instagram accounts. I did attend the rally this summer in Moorestown, where I did listen to a lot of alumni experiences, community members' experiences. There was also a teach-in at WAMS this summer that I attended as well, where I again heard a lot of stories about alumni's experiences in the community. And so really the last couple of months has been me doing a lot of listening and trying to understand better other people's experience when they go through our school district, and trying to think about ways, and I guess that will be the next question, trying to think about ways that we can address these concerns from alumni who are sharing it, and from current students who are also sharing it on the Instagram page as well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Lauren. Mick, you go after Lauren.
Sure. Thanks again for the question, Karen, and for the people that posed that question. So I am very aware and have had conversations with some of the students that have been sharing their stories. I think the event the other week where students and teachers presented their experiences in Moorestown was a very powerful and frankly sorely needed event to have happen, and I think we need more of it. As a person of color who graduated from Moorestown, I see some of the same issues, because the second part of the question was what are the problem areas. I see some of the same issues that existed when I went to the schools. Of course, things are much different and in many cases much better now, but I think some of the problem areas are things that, again, I spoke about in my opening statement, which is having the opportunity for every student to reach their individual potential. And I think, I guess when we talk about solutions, I can speak more to this, but I think that's the real issue, is that we need to prepare an environment for every student to have the opportunity to have the most success possible. Thanks.
You're welcome. I want to thank everybody. You're doing a great job with these time limits. I know 60 seconds is a tough time to try to get your thoughts out. So I appreciate that. Julie, you'll be going next with this question.
Thank you. I am aware, yes. And I enjoyed speaking with the Moorestown Alumni for Racial Equity and Inclusion. Sarah and Val and I met with them together, as did the other candidates. the thing that strikes me as problematic, and I'm not a person of color, so I can't say if it's the most problematic, but the thing that strikes me is the lack of representation, in curriculum. BIPOC students. You also have maybe not, I think there's a policy, I believe there's a policy in Moorestown schools that I'm not sure if it's implemented, but that they're striving for the, 10 seconds left. They're striving to hire teachers at the same percentages as we have students. And I don't know if they've met that goal. My time's up.
That's okay. I'm going to just spell out, Julie used an acronym that perhaps not everybody's familiar with. She used the term BIPOC. That stands for Black, Indigenous, People of Color. So it's an expression that I've only first heard myself just within the past several months. So if there's anyone on the call who didn't know what BIPOC was, that's what Julie was referring to. And Jack, you're next.
As a privileged white male, I was somewhat ignorant to some of the local issues. I fully understand that there is societal issues around race, but I didn't really understand all the local issues until some of the groups, particularly Mari, brought it to my attention. And I believe that Julie is correct that one of our biggest issues here is a lack of representation. Specifically at Roberts. My kids went through Roberts. I had no idea that there were no persons of color on staff at Roberts until I was made aware of it through Mari. So I greatly appreciate that. And I think that really the district needs to address that issue.
Okay. And then Val Gallagher.
Okay. Yes, I am absolutely aware of the, posts and social media awareness, as well as the different types of events and Mari and all of that stuff. And so the fact that we have to have discussions about race and racism in 2020, on one hand, totally boggles my mind, because you'd think we would have evolved way further than we have, unfortunately. I have made it a point to have conversations with people of color, because I'm a 47-year-old white female, Irish, German, Italian Catholic. So I don't know what it's like. So I have conversations and I asked people of color, what do you want? What can we do that's different? Because I think the only way that you're going to make headway is to actually have open conversations. So, I don't want to say too much because I don't want to give my suggestions, but that's a little bit about my stance.
Sorry, I disappeared for a second. Somebody asked a question about the waiting room. So I just want to see if Jeff can hear me. Jeff, if people are joining the call late, can you just check the waiting room and make sure we let them in? All right, so I believe everyone got to address that question. Did I miss anybody? No, okay. And so I'm trying to keep track and make sure we go in the right order. I think Sarah went first that time, is that right? Yes. So Lauren, you're gonna go first on this next one. Now this is sort of the follow-up to that previous question. Since about 2017, the Board of Ed policy has required diversity in curriculum, opportunities, and staffing. A recent report from ProPublica indicates that BIPOC, Black, Indigenous, People of Color, students in our district face the following issues: higher discipline rates, poorer performance rates, underrepresentation in AP and honors courses, and underrepresentation of BIPOC teachers and staff. What ideas do you have to improve our policies and programs to address racism in our schools and increase representation?
Sure. So I think one of the real issues of being a board member is making sure that you understand what your roles and capabilities are within the framework of being a board member. So one of the things that I did this summer in listening to a lot of the different stories and experiences that people were sharing was reached out to the board president and suggested that we establish a race committee that was under the board umbrella so that we could kind of take a bigger look at the umbrella of how the district is handling race. And so, you know, happily last week was the first meeting of this newly formed committee, and I'm excited to be a member of that at the moment. We also recently just had a resignation of our HR leader. And so definitely making it known to the superintendent, because he is in charge of hiring, that hiring a new HR person with a clear priority of hiring diverse faculty, you know, is definitely something that I have communicated as well. So time is up. There's many more things I could talk about, but respecting the time here.
Thanks. I know for sure this is a big topic that's hard to address in 60 seconds. Mick Weeks.
Sure. So I want to jump back and talk about, I think in the late 70s or so, early 80s, I attended Moorestown School starting in the 80s. We had a much more diverse staff and faculty. And I think that might be something we want to revisit to try to help address this. Because I think if we have more people from more diverse backgrounds with diverse perspectives and different understandings, we can start to address some of the systemic issues that are in place, you know, in our district, unfortunately. And I don't think there's any malice or lack of intention. I just think if we have more voices and more perspectives and more understanding, we'll be able to address this more effectively. So, but I think the way we got to that position in the 70s and 80s was that we made an effort on recruitment of diverse perspectives and backgrounds of people with those qualities. So I think as a board member, I would be encouraging that to continue and to have a renewed effort for that. So that's the succinct version.
Thank you. Julie Woodrow.
Thank you. So I kind of touched on it before. I think it's really important for the district to work on recruiting diverse group of people for all staff positions, not just teachers. Also, you know, I would definitely support more representation, as I said, in the curriculum. I know that I believe it's the 7th graders are reading a book stamped, things like that, just adding to the curriculum. Not all curriculum has to presume that everyone's white. Another thing is, one of the core competencies of social emotional learning is social awareness, and part of that is not just acknowledgement of diversity, but appreciation of diversity. So students and teachers working together to not just acknowledge that it's there, but oh, time's up. Okay.
You can finish your sentence if you want. Okay. All right. Jack Fairchild.
Thank you, Karen. So as a board, we're a policy-making board, right? We're not there to run the schools. So if there are specific policies around race and diversity that can be made, that's what we should implement. So there's a disciplinary policy in play that I asked at the last board meeting if they had reviewed Mari's document in concert with some of the changes that they were making. But really our job is to question and to encourage the direction that we want the district to take. And I feel it's really important, you know, again, being the privileged white male, to listen to those underprivileged and persons of color and basically everyone to understand the real issue and the real heart of the concerns.
Okay. Sometimes I get confused on whether I'm muted or unmuted. All right, so thank you, Jack. Val Gallagher.
I'm going to reiterate, because there's been a couple of topics Mick and Julie actually touched upon that I have been asking a lot of questions. First off, we have some amazing policies already in place from the Board of Education. So my first thought is we need to go back to those and revisit them. And I know that there's something in there that talks about the percentage of students versus the percentage of educators, and those educators, and I don't know factually this is it. I have to go back and look at it and I couldn't find it, but let's just say it's 6%. So 6% of the educators should be people of color. Well, I'm kind of certain that we're not there. And again, although the board is not responsible for recruiting and hiring those individuals, what are we doing to go and find them? What areas are we going to find, educators that are of color that have amazing talent that we could pull into our school system?
All right, thank you, Val. And Sarah, you're the last one for this question.
Thanks. I'm kind of going to piggyback off of what Val just said. She's absolutely right. We've had policies in place regarding race and equity for years now. And it took parent groups and student groups to form to get people's attention to actually follow those policies. So to say we should implement a new policy is baffling to me, because we're going to create a policy and then we're just not going to follow it. So how about we get back to basics, follow the policies that are actually on the books right now. Let's read them and implement them before we start creating new ones. Same with a committee. We can implement all the committees we want. If we don't actually follow through with them, they are useless. In terms of attracting teachers, so I went online and I looked at every single job posting that MTPS has out there. It gives about a 2-line blurb about what the job offers. It does not talk about our district at all. It does not talk about the diversity we have within our district. So how would we expect teachers to apply to these jobs when we don't put ourselves out there and present ourselves as the diverse district we are? Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. All right, I did mention in the beginning that there would be 3 diversity questions, but we're going to jump to a different subject for now. And then we'll get back to that 3rd question in a little bit. So this is a question that has to do with the role of the board. And the question is, the Board of Ed manages and balances the needs of 4 general constituencies: the students and their parents advocating for them, the Moorestown teachers and administrators whom it employs, the teachers union with whom it negotiates, and the Moorestown taxpayers who fund the schools. How would you rank and weigh these constituents in terms of importance and your support as a future member of the BOE? So it's the students and their parents, the teachers and the administrators, basically the employees, the teachers union, and the taxpayers. How would you rank and weigh them in terms of importance from your perspective? And Mick, you'll be going first on this one.
Yeah, I thought I was catching that one. So, okay, so I would actually, my understanding from going to the board training and being a board member for several years, the board's primary responsibility is ensuring the best educational opportunities for our students. So in that ranking, the students have to come first. When I worked with districts in my previous role at Apple, I would always talk with the administrators about any question you're contemplating, anything you're thinking about doing. It should always be you should always have in that sentence somewhere, and this benefits the students because. And so unless that is the main priority, then I don't think you're necessarily prioritizing correctly. As for where the others rank, I think the others rank varies depending on what you're talking about. If we're negotiating the teacher's contract, that may take some more precedence. If we're talking about the budget, the taxpayers may take more precedence, but ultimately it's always the students that need to come first and the parents advocating for them.
All right, thank you, Mick. Julie.
Thank you. So this one's easy for me. The board members are responsible to the district's students primarily. So for me, I rank it students and parents first and foremost. We need to vote on policy that's in the best interest of our kids, because we're all parents. And that's what we care about the most, right? Our kids and their education. Students and their parents are number one for me. Taxpayers are number two. You said, what is it? What was the percentage of our taxes? I just looked at my tax bill. I can't even remember. Right this second.
60%.
Yes.
60%.
It's a lot of money that the taxpayers are paying. Next thing for me on the list would be teachers and administrators. Oh, 10 seconds. And then finally the teachers union would be at the bottom of my list. Oh, perfect timing.
Thanks, Julie. Jack.
So the New Jersey School Board Code of Ethics states, I will make decisions in terms of the educational welfare of children and will seek to develop and maintain public schools that meet the individual needs of all children, regardless of their ability, race, creed, sex, or social standing. Nowhere in the Code of Ethics does it talk about any of those other three groups that you had stated. So the children are always the top priority.
Okay, thanks, Jack. Val Gallagher.
Well, we have a common theme here. We all seem to agree that first and foremost, it's about the best interests of the students and obviously the parents, because the parents are the overseers of the students. I also believe that the teachers and administration probably fall a close second, maybe with the taxpayers. And I had a conversation with Brian Carter last month about my son, and he's the principal over at Roberts. And one of the questions I asked him was, what can we as parents and ultimately the community do better to help support them in their journey as the teachers and the administration? And he said, Val, that's a really good question and not one that anybody's ever asked me. Why not? Why aren't we having more conversations with the parents? Why aren't we having more conversations with the teachers, and the administration on a deeper level?
All right, thanks. Sarah, your turn.
Sure. So this is going to be short. Obviously, it's students first. That goes without saying. That is my number one priority. Is why it's basically why I am running, and it will continue to be my focus. I find it interesting that there were 4 categories here: students and parents, teachers and administration, MEA, and taxpayers. 3 of those are actual people, and 1 of them is an organization. So I don't even believe that you could rank the MEA because they are an organization. They are not specific people. So that's my 2 cents on it.
All right, thank you. Lauren.
Sure. Make it across the board. I mean, definitely the number one priority of a board member is the students. I am a teacher because my number one priority is the students, and I want to impact students in a positive way. And so as a board member, I feel the exact same way. When we are making difficult decisions, like when we were talking about the budget, considering budget cuts every year, I absolutely weigh how this is going to affect students, how this is going, and often the budget cuts that we are talking about, the trimming that we're talking about, affects the most marginalized students because it does the smallest amount of, it might have the smallest amount of impact on a population of an overall setting. But, that is something that I absolutely makes every budget year really challenging, because to me, it always is about the students and how we can best serve them. So that I will leave it at that.
All right, thanks. Okay, so we're moving on to another question. And it's sort of a little bit of a follow-on to this question in a way. The question is, with the recent teacher contract and increase in taxes, there's a perception that the BOE is putting the interests of the union ahead of those of the taxpayers. In the future, how would you negotiate with the union? And Julie, you'll be going first on this.
Of course. How would I negotiate with the union? Let me just give my perspective here. The union is there to advocate for their members. They are not there to advocate for the people that their members serve. We on the board advocate for our students. So in negotiations, I would definitely make sure that I'm keeping in mind who we're serving. I think it's important that, I mean, our teachers are amazing. And the fact that they pulled out remote learning back in March in a weekend is astounding to me. I have nothing but respect for our teachers. But I think there needs to be some real hard lines drawn when it comes to negotiating union contracts.
All right, thank you, Julie. Jack.
This is a tough question. If being on the negotiating committee last time was a very trying process, a very difficult process, one that is very difficult to describe and explain to people that haven't gone through it. I really wouldn't want to show my hand and say how I would negotiate with them, because there's 2 Lisa Trepanys attending on the list, so they're already ganging up on me.
Okay. After Jack is Val Gallagher. How would you negotiate with the unions?
I totally agree with Jack. This is such a tough and loaded question. So I have spent many, many years negotiating, you know, from when I sold my previous business to working for a couple of small companies by the name of Panasonic and Xerox. I now get to negotiate whether I'm representing buyers or sellers in real estate, and it's something that I love and I'm really good at. Here's what I know about negotiations. It's about give and take. It's about give and take. And it's not a take, me. We have to look at what's in the best interest overall for not only the teachers, but again, we've all said students are the #1 priority. So what the union may think is in the best interest in whatever they suggest may not be in its current format. So we have to have conversations, and that's all I'm going to let you know.
All right, thanks, Val. Sarah Rivera, you're next.
Thanks. So I think one thing Jack just said was very telling. Jack is a current member of the Board of Education, and he is fearful of talking because of what the MEA president may or may not say. His exact words were, they are ganging up on him. There is no denying we negotiated a terrible MEA contract with salary increases, like I said before, in the high 3s and low 4%, with the average in the state of New Jersey being 3.01%. That means 50% of the districts had negotiated rates lower than 3.01%. We created a budget that was unaffordable, and now we are stuck with it for 3 years. So we have to negotiate lower rates. The higher the rates, the less teachers we can have. That is why we had to let go of 8 staff in year 1, which was last year, and I think another 19 this year. So if you want to keep your staff, you want to keep your teachers, you want to keep your paras, we need to negotiate more reasonable MEA contracts with lower rates.
Thank you, Sarah. Lauren Romano, you're next.
Sure. And so I just will disclose that the last negotiations, I abstained from all discussions with that, just because of conflicts. Even though I teach at a private school, still was conflicted in various ways. So I did remain outside of those negotiations. I just would simply suggest that as we've been talking about recruiting candidates to come to Moorestown, one of the challenges that we are presented with is the need for a competitive salary, providing a place that people want to come work. And when we're struggling already to hire that diverse pool, I certainly don't think we want to have a reputation that we are always in an adversarial relationship with our union. I think it should be a cooperative relationship. For the most part, I absolutely think it is a cooperative relationship. I definitely think both sides listen to each other. But as far as actual contract negotiations, I would have to abstain.
And Mick.
Sure, thanks. So I think everybody may not be aware, but school board members have to, there's mandatory, mandated by law training that school board members have to go to. And in my last year, the training I had to go to was about contract negotiation. And so I think one of the things that needs to be understood, or several things that need to be understood. One is that there are parameters in which you're able to negotiate with the union that are prescribed and set out, and we don't have a lot of leeway or negotiation capability there. But to the point of the question, how would I negotiate with the teachers union? Well, I would realize I'm negotiating with an organization that is there to advocate for people who are advocates for our children. So while a lot of people focus around the negotiation and the part about the finances, it's also negotiating the work conditions, the work rules, and kind of how we're going to deliver the best opportunity for our students to learn. So I think it's being holistic about it. I think it's treating them as the professionals that they are, and realizing that, as one of the previous people said, it's give and take. And so I would do it in good faith, and understanding that we want to get the best outcome for everybody involved.
All right, thanks, Mick. I think everybody answered that question, right? Okay. All right, so I did mention earlier on that we were going to have a third question on diversity, inclusion, and race, so that's coming up now. And I also wanted to kind of help the audience. I know some of you have made reference to an organization called MARAE. Maybe not everyone knows what that is. So I'm going to read this question out and help identify that for them. So recently, groups such as Moorestown Alumni for Racial Equity and Inclusion, MARAE, and the parents group, Moorestown Alliance for Diversity and Equity, which is acronymed to MADE, have formed. Do you intend to partner with them to address issues of racism, equity, inclusion, and diversity? And if so, how? Jack, you'll be going first on this.
I'm not sure about partnership, but Mari has put out a number of documents that are well written, well researched, and on point. So partnership might be a little strong, but I certainly want to hear their voice, and I want to hear MADE's voice as well, and listen to their ideas. And if they have good ideas and good suggestions, then try to see them implemented.
Okay. Thank you. Val.
Well, I think we need to understand, their needs and their desires. Kind of going back to something that I talked about earlier. I'm not a person of color. We don't have enough educators who are of color. And I think that when I look at the overall much larger grand scheme of things, we really, the superintendent hopefully will look at attracting people of color as educators, because I believe those people will help create the conversation, because I don't know how to start that conversation. I can listen, I can help create ideas, but as far as implementation, I do believe that we need to have in every school, we need to have several educators that are of color, because who knows better than them? So whether it's discussing incorporating certain books, to make it, mandatory as part of the school curriculum, I don't know. That's not my skill set, but my idea is we bring in the people who know it, who have lived it.
Thanks, Val. Sarah Rivera, you're next.
Thanks. So I think there's kind of two portions to this. I think there's a policy portion, and I think that there's a curriculum portion. And although the board has a seat on the curriculum committee, I think the majority of those decisions would be made at the administration level and at the, with our input as being a part of the committee. In terms of policy, however, I do believe that we already have a lot of great policies on the books, and they do not need to be rewritten necessarily. We do not necessarily need to have subcommittees formed. Let's get back to basics. Let's follow the policies as they're written and then see where we are. And maybe by following the policies, we will already address some of their concerns. But in terms of curriculum, I think a lot of that is up to the administration.
All right, thanks, Sarah. Lauren.
Sure. I currently, since MAID was created after the second meeting, I've been attending those meetings so that I can listen and understand more of the community members' needs. While I am a Moorestown alumni, I think I'm out of the age bracket of the current Moray group to attend those meetings, but I've had much dialogue with, various members of that committee, that group. And so one of the reasons that I did think it was important as a board that we create a committee, ad hoc committee on race and racism, is to show that as a board and as a district, this is an issue that we care about. So if policies are already in place, we're showing that we really need to make sure that what is in place is being implemented the most effectively, that we need to show that as a board, as leadership, we are saying this needs to be a priority and this needs to be something that we stand behind and support all of our staff and our students as we're having this very challenging and difficult discussion. Thanks.
Thank you. All right, Mick, you're next.
Sure. With both of those groups and other interested parties, I'm an advocate for partnering in whatever form that takes, participation, but to get to the ultimate goal, which is to have more input, better conversations, and better understanding. As I mentioned at the beginning, I was chair of the communication committee for a period while I was on the board, and we got the community forums going. We had decent participation with that, but compared to some other forms of participation people participate in, say social media, we really could have done a lot better. So I think one level of partnership could be working with these groups to help drive attendance and participation in those things like the community engagement forums. That's where the board can have a dialogue with community members, with organizations, and I think it's a place where a lot of work could get done. So I would love to see that happen.
Thanks, Mick. All right, Julie.
Thank you. One of the big things that I feel is so important is community and parent input. So I also agree that community engagement forums would be wonderful. I would love to have as much input from the community as possible because that's who we represent as elected board members. We are representatives of the community. So they need to be able to we need to be accessible as members of the board. So I think as many opportunities as possible for the community to be able to communicate directly with the board is definitely the way to go. I can't remember what the last part of I have 10 seconds to wrap it up. I lost my train of thought, but just to go back and say that I think community input is so, so important. Thanks.
All right, thank you. So I think we have time for one more question. And since we've been talking about communicating with the community, this one sort of is a nice segue. So the person who wrote this knows a little bit something, I guess, about the Board of Ed, because this person quotes a policy. So it says Board Policy 167 addresses the importance of transparency and communication with parents. Do you agree that Policy 167 requires the BOE to take and answer parent questions during public comment at board meetings? If not, do you nonetheless think the board should respond to parent questions at its meetings? And if so, what will you do to enable that? And Val, you're going first this time.
So transparency is something that I live my life by, and I teach my children to live their life by the same way. Yes, I believe the Board of Education absolutely, positively should be taking questions from parents. I also believe in taking it to a whole nother level, and that is having smaller community forums with smaller groups where we can actually create think tanks, because it's no doubt that a lot of parents in Moorestown, unfortunately, feel like they have had zero say in everything that has transpired since coronavirus. There is no plan in place. We have no idea where things are headed. You know, other schools are opening up. We haven't even had that conversation. The governor just, gave the executive order for indoor sports to resume, such as wrestling, and we're not even having the conversation. So it's time to listen to parents, because parents are going to advocate for their children.
Thank you, Val. Sarah?
Yes, thanks. So yes, I totally agree that we should be responding to questions. I believe policy 167, because it wasn't really a hot button at one of the board meetings, it says something like statements, questions, and inquiries shall be addressed by the board president, the presiding member, or the board member that it was directed to. I deal with contracts for the government all the time. A shall statement is a must do. It's not a suggestion. It's not optional. Shall be addressed. And this was reiterated multiple times. So yes, I do agree that we must be responding. Now, if we want to change that policy, if the board decides to change that policy, they can do so. But as of the way it stands right now, we would be not following policy if we did not respond to questions. It's a shall statement. It's not optional.
Thanks, Sarah. Lauren?
Sure. So I know at the board meeting that this issue was addressed, our solicitor addressed it and, stated that the board was following the policy and the procedures. I'll say, as a board member, one of the things that we're trained is that state law requires a public comment period at board meetings, but it is not a time for board members to engage in a dialogue with members of the public. If the members of the public has a question, school district staffers will sometimes answer. Sometimes the board president may choose to answer, and sometimes they will get back to them later with information. That's what we're trained as board members, is the policy during board meetings. I also would just say, as my experience 3 years on the board prior to COVID, prior to the remote learning, when there were 12 people in the audience, was it much more ability to kind of answer direct questions and a give and take? Yes. And that just naturally happened at board meetings prior to COVID. Now that we're in a Zoom format and there's maybe 40 people that want to make a comment, that's fantastic. As board members, we listen to those comments, but we would not have a time in a public meeting setting to answer and address everyone's individual questions when they could be answered directly by the teacher, superintendent, or principals of the buildings that they're designated to. Thanks.
All right, thank you. Mick?
Sure. So I think Lauren just spoke to some of what I was going to say, which is basically that state law requires a public comment period. Public comment is just that, it's comment. Board meetings are actually meetings in public, not public meetings. That's also by state law. That's part of the understanding we were given during our training. But this, and again, I'm going to sound like a broken record, but this is why specifically the communications committee created the community engagement forums, because of the restrictions. And I remember when I joined that committee and became the chair, I specifically said, we need to find a way to have more dialogue with the community. If we're not allowed to do it in the board meetings, this is another way we can do it. And so we got that off the ground, and that's one of the accomplishments I'm really proud of. And I would look to continue more of that. I think that's the answer to that concerning that question.
Thanks, Mick. Julie, it's your turn.
Thank you. I was going to say the same thing as Lauren and Mick did. It was my understanding that it's a public comment period and not a time to engage. However, that wording makes it sound like the board is not open to community input. And that's just, it can't be the case. For me, it would not be the case. I would love to be on a communications committee. I love the idea of community forums. It's my hope that before we get to a board meeting where we're voting on something, the community has already had a chance to engage with the board. I think it's really important. So I wouldn't want people to be turned off by that law that says it's not a time to engage, because it's not. But hopefully there has already been engagement before that period of time. And I really hope that, you know, if I could have the pleasure of serving on the board, that one of my main things would be to do whatever I could do with the board to facilitate communication with the community.
All right, thanks, Julie. Jack, I think you're the last one to go on this question, and then we're going to be moving into the wrap-up phase.
Okay, so I agree with our board solicitor. That particular policy states all statements, questions, or inquiries shall be directed to the presiding officer, and any questions or inquiries directed by a participant to another board member shall be redirected to the presiding officer, who shall determine if such a statement, question, or inquiry shall be addressed by the presiding officer or on behalf of the board or by the individual board member. So that's specifically written to make sure that you're addressing the president and not another member. But we should, you know, as the others have stated, we want to encourage dialogue. Dialogue's very important. Please come to the board meetings, come on Zoom, ask questions, engage us. See us at the supermarket, please stop us and have a discussion.
All right. Thank you, Jack. I want to thank all of you up until this point. You've done an exceptional job sticking with the time limit. So that's been fantastic. We've gotten almost all of the questions in that we hope to get in. I will be sending all of you candidates the questions that we didn't get to ask. There's about 108 that we didn't get to ask, many of which are on similar themes of what we touched on. So you will be getting those after the call. So we're going to be working into wrapping it up at this point. And so we're going to give each of the candidates 2 minutes to make some closing comments, ask for your vote, tell you why they'd like you to vote for them. And Sarah Rivera, you will be going first on this.
Thanks. And thank you, Jack, for actually pulling up the actual policy 167 to read it, because I think you proved my point that it does say shall be addressed. If we created a policy that's in direct conflict with a state law, shame on us. Unfortunately, that is a bylaw of our current board, and we have to follow it until it's changed. So if you want to align a policy with a state law, it's well within your right. Second, I want to talk about the fact that we are chronically underfunded by roughly $1 million, $1.5 million, I think was the number thrown out there. So our budget is $82 million. And while every dollar matters, we're focusing on small increments of funding instead of looking at the bigger picture and seeing what can be negotiated the best. And the biggest chunk of our expenses here is the MEA contract. Okay, so we can look at the little expenses here that are $30,000 here, $50,000 there, but that's not going to move the needle to where we need to be to keep the tax increases low or non-existent. We have to tackle the big elephant in the room, and that is the MEA contract. So the other thing that Lauren mentioned was that she abstained from approving the MEA contract. I don't believe that's actually the case. I do believe you voted yes for that. And now I just want to turn to who I am. Obviously, I'm the type of person who does my homework. like I said in the beginning, I'm tenacious and I'm data driven. If there's anything that there's data available for it, I'm your girl. And I will carry that through to the nth degree on the Board of Education. I will work with the team. I will put the kids first, and I look forward to getting this done. The one thing we also didn't mention is return to school, and that kind of baffles me. We need to get our kids back in 5 days. Hopefully that's by January, and if it's not, we'll tackle that in January.
So Mark, I just want to be sure, were you giving them 2 minutes for that? Okay, good. Yeah, you know what? I have to tell you, I was positively shocked that of the nearly 120 questions we got, there was only one that related to the pandemic and only one related to gun safety in schools. So it's very interesting. I mean, I guess there haven't been any mass shootings in schools because kids haven't been in schools, but it was interesting to see what cycles through in terms of being priorities for folks. So thank you so much, Sarah. I wanted to be sure that Mark knew to give 2 minutes and not 1 minute for this, and he did. He's on top of it. All right, so Lauren, you'll be going next, 2 minutes for closing comments.
Sure. Just to clarify, I guess my comment from earlier, I said I abstained from negotiations with the upcoming, with the past contract because I am a teacher at a private school, but in talking with our solicitor, he did say that I could vote in the final decision, the final contract, but that up through all the negotiations, I did abstain from those discussions within the board setting. So to clarify that, and then let me just make closing statements. If reelected, adapting the district to meet the challenges and opportunities of the pandemic, which encompasses so many areas from operational to curricular to financial, will continue to be my priority. During this crisis, I will continue to make decisions putting the safety and well-being of all of our students and staff at the forefront. Additionally, I will require district accountability for delivering the best possible education to all of our students, seek measurable metrics as we evaluate our plan and best practices, and promote social and emotional learning for our students and staff, and monitor financial impacts of pandemic-related expenses and revenues lost during this time. Successful global leader citizenship is the result of offering all of our students the opportunity to grow into their best selves. The spotlight on racism, social inequalities, and implicit biases at the national level has shown that there is work to be done within our own district to ensure that all students have these valued opportunities. After listening to student experiences, staff and community concerns over the past few months, I'm committed to address these issues and help ensure that the district more closely examines and addresses racism with a holistic approach. I know there is still much more work needed to be done in the area of equity and fairness in our district, and hope for the opportunity to continue this work. My experience, passion for education, and commitment to the community are why I am running for re-election and ask for your vote. Thank you.
Thanks, Lauren. Mick Weeks.
Sure. Well, thanks. First, I want to say I appreciate everybody who's participated in this tonight, especially my colleagues who are running for the board. But in summation, I would just like to add that my work in education has been part of a family legacy, which may be why I'm so passionate about it. Combined, my parents, Carolyn and Mickey, contributed more than 50 years of service to the School District of Philadelphia in the classroom and as administrators. Though retired, my parents are still active in education. My father is an adjunct professor in education at Holy Family University, and my mother is a leader in many educationally focused organizations. I have a brother and sister that both spent time as classroom teachers before moving on to other careers. Aunts, uncles, cousins, all have had careers and are currently working in schools. Strong support for education and the opportunities it can provide are interwoven into the fabric of my family and my life. I want to share some of my core beliefs, which I feel reinforce my commitment to this role and how I will approach it. I believe that all children are entitled to an educational structure that provides the best opportunity to fulfill their individual potential. I believe all children should have a safe and nurturing learning environment based upon mutual respect that celebrates their differences and strives for inclusion. I believe that a strong educational environment should help children harness their innate creativity and curiosity and develop it into a lifelong passion for learning. I also believe our community should be active participants in positively supporting and inspiring our students, teachers, administrators, to help fulfill a promise of an exceptional educational experience that empowers all involved and strengthens our bonds. I believe in positively supporting the partnership that exists between the community, the Board of Education, the administration, and the staff, and the responsibility to operate a fiscally sound and well-operated school district. and I believe that Board of Education members should endeavor to be thoughtful, honest, and respectful in their communication and deliberations with fellow board members, administrators, staff, students, and members of the community. If you share any or hopefully all of these beliefs, then I would really appreciate your support and your vote this year. Thank you, stay safe, and have a pleasant evening.
Thank you, Mick. Julie, your closing comments, please.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure being with everyone tonight. This is great, and I love being able to see all the candidates together. Thank you, Karen. Thank you, Harry. Thank you, Mark. If you haven't noticed by now, I am a huge advocate of communication between the parents and the school board. Our kids are our #1 priority. They absolutely have to be. And I am committed to be an advocate for all of our kids. My kids are in the school district. We all have kids. It's just so important for community voice to be heard. And as a representative of the community, if you vote for me to sit on the school board, I'm absolutely committed to making sure that communication is as open as possible. Working as a team with the board, I understand that we're not always going to agree on things, but there is respect that needs to come along with it. And I'm absolutely committed to that as well, working as part of the team. Advocating for our kids is our #1 priority. I also am very mindful of the fact, and I mentioned this earlier, that we are a very wealthy school district, but we have families who are not anywhere near that. And I really think it's important that decisions be made and communication open for things that work for all the families in the district, not just some of the families. So I really hope that I can count on your vote this November for school board. Thank you.
Thanks, Julie. We're going to go with Jack and then Val.
So thank you, More Unity and Home and School and the other candidates for participating in this forum. If reelected, I'm going to be looking for additional revenue generation. Prior to COVID, I was pursuing an avenue where the district would pull back some of its food service programs on the lower schools and engage local restaurants to provide some of those meals. This is a very successful program that is occurring in other districts in the state. Certainly got put on hold because of COVID, but I would be going down that avenue. If you're looking for additional information for me or want to contact me, you can reach me through Facebook or just Google me. I'll pop right up. I have a pretty large web presence. I'd like, again, to encourage everyone to please vote. As I said in the beginning, engaged and informed citizens are our most valuable assets, and I mean that. So everybody, please return your ballot. Thank you.
Thanks, Jack. Val, we're going to have you go, and then I have just some closing remarks of my own. So Val, you have 2 minutes.
Thank you. Again, thank you, everyone. Thank you, community. I'm like you. I'm a parent. I'm a mom. I'm passionate about my children. I also know that there are a lot of us out there who feel like there's no parental common sense voice currently being represented by the board, and for a number of different reasons. I may not be an educator. I may not be an attorney. I may not have worked in K-12 school systems other than when I sold Xerox and Panasonic products. However, I've owned a business. I'm a strategic thinker. I'm fiscally conservative. The fact that we've got buses running around with 20% or less capacity boggles my mind. It boggles my mind. Those are the types of decisions that need to come. So this way, that deficit that everybody keeps talking about is narrowed down. As I say all the time, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. At some point, push comes to shove. And if you're happy with the status quo, then by all means, vote the status quo. If you're looking for a change and you're looking for someone to represent you as the parent and ultimately your children, then I would invite you to please vote for me. You can find me on Facebook. Many people know how to get a hold of me. I'm a real estate agent at Weichert here in Moorestown. My phone number is out there publicly. If you have any questions or you want to know more about me, please, I encourage you to do so. My family and I are making a financial investment next month, and we're purchasing a home here in Moorestown. So my roots are being planted. Thank you, everyone, and have an awesome night.
Thank you, Val. Before the folks who are watching sign off, I want to make an important public service announcement that doesn't have to do with the Board of Ed, but the 2020 census ends tonight at 11:59 p.m. If you have not responded to that yet, please go to www.census.gov. Not only does the census determine how many congressional representatives New Jersey gets, it also provides federal funding to communities based upon our head count. And right now, Moorestown is only 79.3% complete. If we all complete the census, it's $760 million more dollars that we will get than we stand to get right now at a 79.3% completion rate. So please go online, complete the census. It only takes about 10 minutes. And in terms of voting, there are several ways you can vote this year. Election day is November 3rd. You can vote early if you've already received your paper ballot, by mail, secure drop box, which is right outside of the Moorestown Library, or by returning your ballot to the Board of Elections office at 50 Rancocas Road in Mount Holly. If you do that, you need to bring ID with you. You can also vote in person on Tuesday, November 3rd, or bring your ballot in person on Tuesday, November 3rd. So many options.
Actually, Karen, I'm sorry,
Yeah.
Karen, we have to interrupt. There is no voting in person. There are no machines at polling places.
Provisional
So-
ballot. Provisional ballots if you come in
Provisional
person.
ballot, correctly.
Right, provisional ballot if you go in person. Thank you for clarifying that. I really want to thank Jeff Ari from Moorestown Public Schools. He's been in the little black box on the bottom right of my screen. I don't know where he's sitting on your screen. Jeff managed the Zoom call for us tonight, enabled us to use the Moorestown Public School Zoom account, which you better believe is better than the free one I use that cuts us off after 40 minutes. We had, I think at one point, close to 115 people on the call, so that's a great turnout. He's recorded the call. We'll figure out a way to share this with anybody who missed it. I want to thank the Home and School, and in particular, Harry Fonts for hosting us, Mark Morgan for being our timekeeper, and Rochelle Rabineau, Danielle South, Chris Spergel for helping sort all the questions. We were up till midnight doing that last night. But most of all, I want to especially thank the candidates. Your willingness to serve our community, to have the courage to run for office, to put yourselves out here to be grilled in front of the world is very courageous. I'm very proud of all of you. I'm very, very proud to be a Moorestown citizen and know that you people are my neighbors. So thanks a lot. And thank you to the audience and the voters too for joining us. Have a great night, everybody.
Thanks, Karen.
Thank you.
Bye,
Have a
all.
good night.
Everybody,
Thank
take
you.
care. Have a good night.